You know what it's like when you're watching a movie and you see someone and you think, oh, that's so-and-so from such and such, but you just can't place where you saw them. Maybe it was these horror movies where you saw those so-and-sos. I'm Tilly from What Culture, and this is 9 actors you had no idea were in horror movies. 9. Monica Bellucci, Bram Stoker's Dracula. More than a decade before she co-starred with Keanu Reeves in the Matrix sequels, Monica Bellucci made a fleeting, staggeringly seductive appearance in another of the actor's films, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Bellucci shows up fleetingly in a few scenes of Francis Ford Coppola's sumptuous 1992 gothic horror film as one of Dracula's brides. Though her presence is certainly eye-catching enough, the low lighting and frantic editing make it difficult to spot the actress specifically, especially as you're probably not expecting to see her. Little extra fun fact for you all because I'm such a benevolent god. This was Bellucci's first starring gig outside of her native Italy, and her only significant role in a Hollywood movie until 2000, where she co-starred in the thriller Under Suspicion. 8. Michelle Williams, Species. Michelle Williams may have 4 Oscar nominations to her name nowadays, but only her second major movie role after Lassie saw her appear briefly in 1995's sci-fi horror film Species, where at 15 years old she played a younger version of alien antagonist Syl. If you haven't seen Species in quite some time, and let's be honest, most of us haven't, it's easy to miss that she's even in it at all, despite her getting a decent chunk of screen time at the start of the movie. Though Williams certainly does fine enough in the part, she confessed in later years that she was bullied for appearing in the film, so doesn't seem to have particularly fond memories of it. If you're likely to remember anything about her role though, it's surely that infamous scene where she devours a banana whole, being an alien and all. Thankfully, Williams only just had to tough it out in Hollywood for a few more years before winning the coveted role of Jen Lindley in Dawson's Creek, and the rest is history. 7. Kit Harington, Silent Hill Revelation. It's quite conceivable that you didn't even know that a sequel was made to 2006's generally alright Silent Hill movie adaptation, and so you're even less likely to be aware that it co-stars Kit Harington in the male lead role of Vincent Smith. To be honest, I was far too busy staring at Pyramid Head to notice. The film was released the year after Harington rose to stardom for playing Jon Snow in Game of Thrones, and coincidentally sees him sharing a single scene with his Thrones father, good old Sean Bean. Silent Hill Revelation was also Harington's first ever movie part, and not quite as bad as, say, Hellraiser Hellworld, this 3D sequel was still a major come down from its predecessor. It's probably for the best that Harington more or less fades into the periphery here, given that his American accent is a bit wobbly, if we're being kind. 6. Thandie Newton, Interview with a Vampire. Thandie Newton's 4th ever film role saw her appear in 1994's Interview with the Vampire as Yvette, the ill-fated slave girl who Brad Pitt's Louis is ultimately unable to resist devouring after being turned into a vampire himself by Lestat, played by Tom Cruise. Newton appears in the film for just a few minutes and isn't immediately recognisable given her period wears and concealed hair. Not to mention that the film was released 6 years before she made her big Hollywood breakthrough in Mission Impossible 2, coincidentally another film starring Tom Cruise. It's certainly not an embarrassing early role for Newton by any means, though her presence proves plenty surprising on a contemporary rewatch regardless. 5. Willem Dafoe, The Hunger. Tony Scott's criminally underrated 1983 vampire film The Hunger stars Catherine Deneuve, David Bowie and Susan Sarandon as a vampiric couple and the woman they rope into an uneasy love triangle. Jareth the Goblin King and Janet Wise in a vampire love triangle? Baby Green Goblin? What are you waiting for? Go and watch this movie! In just his 3rd movie role, Willem Dafoe makes a fleeting appearance as one of the 2 men who harass Sarah, played by Sarandon, at a phone booth. Amusingly, despite being credited as second phone booth youth, Dafoe's character is actually the first to be seen and speak in the scene. It's significant casting given that Dafoe has just a few horror roles to his name over the course of his 40-year career, and after The Hunger he didn't appear in another genre entry until 1999. 4. Katherine Heigl, Bride of Chucky. It's fair to say that the majority of the human characters in the Child's Play films are thoroughly outclassed by Brad Dourif's vocal performance as murderous good guy doll Chucky, and in the case of the 4th movie, also his psychopathic spouse Tiffany, voiced with gusto by Jennifer Tilly. And so you may well have forgotten that Bride of Chucky's final girl is played by none other than a 19-year-old Katherine Heigl in one of her first movie roles. As much as Heigl may have seen this as a career stepping stone, it's certainly not an early role to be ashamed ashamed of. The movie's a ton of fun and she's pretty good in it, even getting to put Chucky down for the contemporary count at the end. Given that Heigl's career has been an unpredictable rollercoaster ride of highs and lows ever since, series creator Don Mancini recently said of her part in the film, "I still think it's her best role." 3. Dana Carvey, Halloween 2. Though 1981's first Halloween sequel doesn't hold a candle to John Carpenter's terrific original film, it's still a decent enough entry into the franchise, especially considering some of the lousy efforts that followed. Believe it or not, comedian Dana Carvey makes a near unrecognisable cameo appearance in the film as Barry McNichol, a young man working as an assistant to a news reporter covering Michael Myers' escape. This was Carvey's first ever feature movie role, coming some 5 years before he became a household name on Saturday Night Live. Carvey being a part of the Halloween franchise is especially hilarious, considering that his most iconic role, Garth in the Wayne's World movies, saw him star opposite Mike Myers of all people. What a strange and wonderful world we live in, huh? 2. Samuel L. Jackson, The Exorcist III. The Exorcist III may well be one of the most underrated horror sequels of all time. Yes, I said that. An uncommercial yet endlessly fascinating attempt to do something completely different with the franchise. This is likely why even hardcore horror fans might not know that the great Samuel L. Jackson himself makes a seconds-long appearance in the infamous dream sequence, showing up fleetingly as a blind man. It doesn't help that the scene is packed out with other, more obviously disarming cameos, which I'm going to leave a secret for you all to discover. But even so, Jackson's presence is so uncharacteristically unassuming that he's easily missed. 1. Chloe Grace Moretz, The Amityville Horror. 2005's Ryan Reynolds starring Amityville Horror remake is far from a great movie, but it's also hardly a sacrilegious rehash given that the original 1979 movie in itself is a wildly mixed bag at best. And because there's a fair chance you haven't even bothered to revisit this remake, don't blame you, you'll probably have no idea that it co-stars a 7-year-old Chloe Grace Moretz as the young daughter of protagonists George and Kathy, several years before she jumped into the horror genre with an attempt at playing Stephen King's iconic teenage telekinetic Carrie. It's a relatively prominent role, and yet Moretz is easily missed given her young age, even while watching the movie today. As totally forgettable as the movie is, she acquits herself well in a pretty thankless role. Yet whoever would have guessed that in a mere 5 years later, at the age of 12, she'd be dropping C-bombs left, right and centre in Kick-Ass. Hollywood is wild. And that's our list. Know any other famous faces that have popped up in horror movies? Let us know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and check out our other content. I've been Tilly and this has been What Culture. Cheers for watching and please make sure you're looking after yourselves. Until next time guys, ta-ra!